And we're live. Phil Tarrant, Tom Panos, Real Estate Exposed, where we go behind the real deal in real estate, unpack it, uncover it, discuss it, interpret it, give our view of it, mainly Tom Panos. Tom, how you going? You well?
I'm very well, Phil. It's good to see you again. And another week where we do our chit-chat and our banter, and some people join in online. Others, I get a lot of people actually report back after hearing it on a Saturday morning. I get a lot of messages from people, and I think that's the day the podcast comes out. We're going on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. I don't know, maybe I should set up a phone and run a duo as well on TikTok. We spoke about that briefly the other day about the data that is being captured by TikTok. Do we know who owns TikTok?
I don't know exactly who the owner is. I'm sure we can sort of dig down into it.
Right.
It's out of China.
No, we know it's a Chinese organization.
Yeah, but you don't know who in China owns it. Probably some big conglomerate somewhere or other. But data security, Tom, we've spoken about it before. It's just as relevant as what it is ever. And for all real estate practices, get onto it. New Zealand, it's good to see. Yeah, mortgage advisor in New Zealand. Greetings from NZ, mate. And New Zealand is a great place. We got a growing team out there, and I'm just waiting for my passport to get renewed. I look forward to getting out to Kiwi land and checking it out. It's a great place to visit. I know you're out there quite a lot on your speaking, Tom, and it's good to see that. What's that?
I'm back there next week, Phil. I was there 2 weeks ago. Having said that, I was supposed to be there this week, I think. There's a conference which was the Bailey's conference, but they did cancel it because what happened is they did get a bit of a spike of Omicron there in the last few weeks. So the big 1,000 people events have been cancelled. So it's good to see our viewers coming in from all over the place, Central Coast.
Mate, I read a really good report, Tom. I don't know your view on it. I think it was was either Real Estate or Domain, saying that rents in the Central Coast are going at a rate compared to everywhere else in Australia. Places like Canawal and Charmhaven and Gorican, places like that. Rents are red hot on the Central Coast right now. And for those property investors out there, if you haven't looked at your what rents you're getting recently, or you don't know when your rents are up for renewal, be getting onto that straight away. That's what I'm doing, because there's a lot of money sort of going wanting. But that's the problem, Tom. There's this dichotomy between property investors leveraging property as an asset class and those Australians who choose to live in properties or own to occupy, of which I'm both of them. You copped some flack over the week, Tom, mainly probably geared towards bottom feeders, the bottom feeder real estate investors, probably guys like myself, who are always out there looking for a bargain. Tell me about this, mate. What you've polarized some segments of the real estate sector, mate.
Yeah, look, it wasn't an article that's been written for consumers. It's simply me live streaming a video after a day of auctions on a Saturday. I just do it 5 minutes on my phone, and obviously a journalist from news.com has picked it up and used it to form a story on the Monday. And in that video, I talk about the emergence of the bottom feeder buyer, often an angry buyer, Phil, often an angry buyer. And what happens is, like, you've got a property that was worth $1 million. It's now worth 900. And because they've heard the market has dropped and interest rates are going up, you're coming in and they're asking questions like, oh, what's the best offer you've had so far? Oh, will the owner entertain an offer of 500,000? And you sort of say, like, 500,000? I mean, I get the market's dropped, but we're talking about numbers that probably wouldn't have even been attractive 10 years ago, right? But there is a group of buyers that believe, hey, this might be an opportunity. This is an opportunity to take advantage of some distressed sellers out there. And they try their luck. And all I said is to the agents that were listening, don't be rattled by the bottom feeder. And that word seemed to evoke a lot of emotion. And we had a lot of people sort of respond and make comments and Some were quite dissatisfied. But actually, if you really look at what I was saying, Phil, I was sort of saying to an agent, don't get emotional, be respectful, and actually say to that buyer, listen, that's not going to get this. You're just way off the mark. Let me give you a list of 5 comparables. This is where the market is at the moment. Whereas some agents, they hear these offers and they just lose it. They'll say, are you serious? Like, are you wasting my time? And I don't think you should respond that way, because often these people are actually sellers as well. They own real estate, right? You got to bear that in mind.
So what you're saying is, agents shouldn't get angered at lowball offers. They should just brush it off. Okay, let's do a scenario. Phil Tarrant, buyer, Tom Panos, agent. Tom, mate, this thing's only worth 500 grand. I'm going to give you 500 grand. Come on, you're not going to sell it to anyone else. Come on, let's do a deal.
Phil, firstly, I want to thank you for that offer. I appreciate that you've put some thought and interest into this. Secondly, I want to ask you, how did you arrive at this number? It would be good for me to help understand how you came up with this number. Are there any recent comparable sales that I could actually take to my owner that would support your offer? That would probably be a professional way of sort of saying to someone, hey, listen, where are you coming from? Like, what's this all about? And I suppose most people are going to struggle with coming up with comparable sales because there's nothing there. But it wouldn't surprise me, Phil. You get a fair few people that would actually turn around and say, mate, the market's dropping. Rates are going up. This is a good offer, and it's going to be a really great offer in 3 months if you don't take it. You've got to put it in. If I got someone that was a little bit, stroppy like that, I would say, listen, I will be putting that offer in. Our owners won't be accepting that offer. I won't even be recommending that they consider that offer. And I would suggest that maybe the best thing that you could do is make up your mind. If it wasn't going to get accepted, what would your next offer be if you're interested in this? And I would actually give them a true guideline. Because, Phil, my approach, I'm not one of these people that likes underquoting or being deceptive practices. I would actually just say, hey, listen, if you want to be really serious about having a crack at buying this property, you're probably going to have to be at around 850, 900, right? That's where you're going to have to. I actually feel, believe it or not, a lot of agents aren't going to agree with what I say, but often I'll go to an auction and I'll have a buyer before the auction say, what's roughly the price guide of this property? Most agents are probably going to say, oh, well, the auction's going to start in 5 minutes. You can see for yourself. Man, I don't think buyers like smart asses. I think what a buyer likes is someone that, is straight talking, tells them the damn truth. So I would actually say, listen, I think you're going to have to be around $1 million to even have a chance. And if there's competitive bidding, you're probably going to have to pay more. The auction starts in 5 minutes. But what I want to do is I want to make sure that you don't have any unrealistic expectations. If you're thinking under $1 million, I think it's highly unlikely. It just makes life so much better, because when it does get to 1.1, they've already been set up for that. They already sort of know that. But sometimes, Phil, it's like this game. Oh, don't give them the number. Don't tell them a number. Let's see what number we can get out of them. I think just a little bit more transparent.
But it's all about negotiation, right? There's this who's going to show their hand first. And I've always found in negotiation, whether you're a buyer or the seller, you can typically take control of negotiation early on if you set the price. Whereas a lot of people dance around it, just trying to get someone else to give an indication first. To your point, Tom, if you set expectation early on, that $1 million number, if said buyer gets it for under $1 million, the psychology of that is that, wow, I've got a bargain. I'm really, really happy, right? So
yeah.
And that's a happy buyer is also a happy seller at some point in time. You get to to capitalize on that relationship and steer them through that sort of contracting process, you're creating advocates along the way. So it's just expectation management.
Phil, when I was running my own real estate company, I used to play a game called Guess the Price. We didn't have realestate.com. We didn't have open homes as much. It was a different era back then. But what I used to do is if a buyer gave me an offer, I'd say, hey, listen, hop in the car. Let's do a quick round around this area. I want to show you a few properties. It's only going to take 10 minutes. So what I do is I put the buyer in the car. We drive around. I'd say, what do you reckon that property sold for? And they'd stare it from the outside. The outside is always a good barometer. You know the street. You know what it looks like. And they'd say, oh, 400? Nah, it sold for 600. Let's go to the next one. So you would do 3 or 4 properties, and I'd call it Guess the Price is Right. And you'd end up coming back and you would have educated in 10 minutes the buyer on what's the most recent sales. And you could do exactly the same thing with vendors. So if you ever had a vendor that said, oh no, my place is worth $2 million. Hey, hop in the car for a moment. You drive around. What do you reckon that sold for? Oh, 2 million? No, it sold for 1.7. Let's go to the next one. So that process, I reckon, Phil, if you start looking at your clients as students instead of prospects, your life gets better. Treat people like students. When they're a student, you're educating them. When they're a prospect, you're selling them. It has a different tone, a different set of energies in student to prospect.
Well, all you need to do is think back to the great teachers you had at school and the respect you had for them. And, I was only talking just the other day around how my sort of love of mathematics really happened in year 11 and 12 because I had a really good teacher. And you sort of retain that sort of information. I would also put to it, Tom, by you guess the price is right. The utility and the efficiencies around that as well as a buyer or seller. Now you've got these listing platforms, realestate.com, for example, which allows you to do all this sort of stuff. But as a real estate buyer, I don't want to waste my time with unrealistic expectations. I've only got a handful of time to actually go and look and inspect real estate. So if I'm going to do it, you've got to be hyper efficient. That's as a buyer and also as a vendor. Going around lowballing, and you think of it this way again as a property investor, or if you're dealing with property investors, if I go out and put 100 offers on properties at really, really low prices, thinking that, one of these might come up and I'm going to do well out of it. And guess what? One might come up at a really low ball rate. You don't know the reasons why someone might be selling. Just to manage the process of lowballing offers is a full-time job. It's an absolute full-time job in its own right. Hence the reason why I use a buyer's agent who are out there doing that same things for me. It just creates so much inefficiencies in the market, which is not really beneficial for anyone. But that's the way it works.
If anyone is watching this that is in the process of buying, that is a buyer, I would just say, listen, take advantage of this market. But when you put in an offer that is just way off the mark, right? What happens, and this has happened a few times in the last month or two, I have had buyers have put in offers very low. Those offers have been given to the vendor. They then have increased the offer, and then the vendor says no again. And after a while, Phil, you know what the vendor says? Forget about going back to that dingbat. I don't want to sell to them. They get annoyed. Vendors get annoyed that buyers are playing games. So I would suggest, if you are a buyer and you are trying to take advantage of this market and you do want to buy well, like we all do, hey, just be reasonable. And when I say be reasonable, don't go in at half the price of the property. Do your comparables. If the comparables show that it's an $800,000 property, I think go off and say to the agent, would I be wasting my time coming in at 700? It's a nice, would I be wasting my time coming in at 700? And it's actually pretty good because it's actually not even committal. You're actually just saying, I'm not even giving you that offer. Would I be wasting my time? Phil, I used to do this as a real estate agent to my vendors. I'd have a vendor that was chasing 500, and I'd have a buyer that might only have 400 to spend. And a lot of the times the vendor wouldn't tell you what their last figure is. I just ring them up and say, listen, I've got a buyer, thoroughly qualified. They're ready to go, finance approved. Would I be wasting my time bringing them around? They've got a budget of 400. The vendor would say something like this: you'd be wasting your time. Or they'd say, will they come up a little bit, Tom? Or they'd say, yeah, bring them around. So if they said number 2 or number 3, right, you sort of realize, wow, I'm in the zone here. They might want 500, but they're actually pretty flexible. Normally it was people that were going through a divorce. People going through a divorce are very good at hiding divorces, by the way.
Yeah, they are. Well, these are one of the 3 or 4 Ds of real estate: death, divorce, debt,
Deceased estate.
deceased estate,
Or
distress. Maybe it's 5 Ds. But everyone's chasing those 5 Ds, right? That's not always the case. Most properties are selling because someone's just either upgrading or downgrading, right? Like, there's a big reason for it. And a lot of people who are selling real estate aren't desperate. They could just be looking to cash in on market conditions and just being a bit opportunistic. I got a question for you, Tom. What was the first car you had as a real estate agent that you were happy to drive clients around in, potential buyers around in?
Red Toyota Corolla.
Did you have a red Toyota Corolla, did you?
I had a red Toyota Corolla that I bought from Pickles Auctions.
And that was the car that used to drive potential vendors around in or buyers?
Yeah, 19, 20 years. The first car was a Datsun 180B, but I wasn't in real estate. It was a mustard-coloured Datsun 180B with a black leather top, vinyl top, I would say. I don't think it was leather. And then the second car was a red Toyota Corolla, and it was a big step up for me. I remember it was a car about 10 grand. The third car, Phil, was a Mitsubishi Magna, one of the worst cars ever built in the history, that was loaded with problems, left, right, and center. And after the Mitsubishi Magna, we started moving up the ranks a little bit and started doing a bit of the European car thing. I, like every other agent, got seduced with driving Mercs, BMWs, all of those. And real estate agents, I've got it. I laugh about it now, because I laugh about the agent that I call all swank, no bank. I laugh about it, but I sort of do get it, because I did go through that phase myself, Phil. Like,
you probably have to, right? You probably have to go through that phase at some point.
Yeah, it's real estate and cars. I think it's the fact that you're not going into an office and just staying in the office all day. With real estate, you're sort of in and out of your car all the time. You're driving through your community. People are seeing you. The local businesses are seeing you. So it is a status symbol. I don't care what anyone says, but I'll tell you straight, man, you know what I've noticed about cars? And I've noticed it with my Tesla. The only people that really ever get excited are 10-year-old kids, man, right? They just pick Tesla. You know, I don't think people, if you've ever, to any agent out there, if you think to yourself that a car is going to be something that's going to grab a lot of attention, particularly if you want to get the attention of the opposite sex or trying to impress people, I've got to tell you, my experience is that most people that look at my car, Bart, are just young little kids going, Tesla, mummy, look, Tesla.
Can I download this convo? Yes, you can. You can listen to it on the REB podcast network. Just go to any podcast player, look up REB, and you'll be able to find this download, this podcast, and you can download it there. So hope that helps you out there, Lyndon.
So Phil, so I'm clear as well, because I do get people ask, is it the REB property investment? Is it what?
It's just REB. If you just look up REB or Secrets of the Top 100 Agents, but just look up Real Estate Business REB on the podcast player, you'll be able to find the REB podcast network, and all of these recordings go up on there, as well as watching it on Facebook Live or YouTube or LinkedIn or wherever else other people are watching it.
Can I ask you, Phil, in terms of podcasts, for your own self-education, I mean, I know that you're on about 3 or 4 podcasts, maybe 5. What do you listen to? What are the podcasts that you've been listening to? What do you listen to?
I listen to a lot of like history podcasts, which like history hit type stuff, or I like the historic type of things. The podcasts I listen to, I sometimes tune into like the Morning Call, which is a NAB product, which is just a download of information like stats and figures about what's happened overnight in the markets. It just gives me a sense for what's going on. I listen to a lot of the podcasts that come out of this company. I listen to a lot of current affairs type of stuff, which is just a download of information at aggregate level, so I know what's going on. It allows me to sort of chat about most things in some capacity. When I jump onto this live stream and podcast with you, Tom, when you think of like the way we've covered some of the topics across this, we're firmly chatting about real estate at the moment. But if you think back to, running up to the elections, it was very much orientated around what's happening in elections and impacts of property. I think this particular discussion we should have, Tom, is what's going on in the world, what's going on in Australia, and what is the impact on property. It's pretty important stuff. So, you can't view property within its own sort of microcosm or prism, right? Property is the backbone of the economy in Australia, and anything that happens inside and around the economy has an impact on property. It's all the big headlines around building approvals at the moment and issues with tradies, and I think 1 in 8 Australians or 1 in 10 Australians work within the property sector or part of the property supply chain. So if you think about how intrinsic property is to everything else that's going on, we've even got people out of Texas. Great place to be buying property, Tom.
Yeah. Well, Phil, before we leave today, I'd love to ask you, are rates going up next Tuesday?
Yeah.
How much you reckon?
I've heard different sort of views and opinions on this from people who have allegedly pretty close to what the views are. There's certain banks who are saying, there's going to be 5 50 basis points rises up until the end of the year. So it'll go 50, 50, 50, 50, 50. There's other banks who are saying it's going to go 50, 50, 25, 25. I'd be pricing in it.
Phil, there's a lot of articles I'm reading in Fin Review and bits and pieces that come through email newsletters that they're going to land on a rate of 6% as what a mortgage rate will be in February. But that's the way it's heading. And the numbers that you've just spoken about, whether it's 50, 50, 50, 20, whatever, at the end of the day, it's all pointing to either 5.5 or 6% by February as being the rate people are going to be at, which is a lot more than 2 or 2.5 that they were on.
People's interest repayments are going to be doubled from what it was, back in April before all these rate rises started happening. Now, to be fair, and there's a really good report or good paper from the I think it was the Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank a week or so ago, and the view is that family balance sheets should be able to weather this rising rate environment. They're as strong as they ever have been, as in people cash in the bank or ability to meet their mortgage repayments. So I know the Reserve Bank has that in mind as it goes down this process to try and curb inflation. It depends what your view is on the banks. Let's remember a rising rate environment is probably good for banks and for their balance sheet and the outcome for their shareholders, of which most of the shareholders in bank stocks at somewhere or another in our superannuation. So the view is that this rising inflationary environment is largely temporary. It will start to patter out next year and come back to more normalised conditions. The Reserve Bank is pretty much saying we're okay if inflation is like it is right now. We need to get it under control, but we don't need to rush to get back to that target band of inflation of 2-3% per annum, because largely most Australians are going to be able to cover these rent or cover these increased mortgage repayments Tom, you got to be looking at your mortgages right now if you have mortgages. There's a lot of competition out there. I think it was back in October or November last year, can't remember exactly, where the banks, APRA advised the banks to lift the serviceability buffer from 2.5 to 3%. So if the standard variable rate was 3% at the bank, they had to assess you on the basis that it was 6%. So this natural buffer has been put into most home loans if they've been originated over the last couple of years. That gives some sense to the prudential nature of the Australian banking system. We're pretty conservative and pretty secure in that basis. So when you compound the fact that serviceability has been based on much higher interest rates, and also the fact that the propensity for people to be able to manage increased mortgages in this period because of the impacts of COVID and the positive effect on family balance sheets, most people should be okay. That doesn't mean that some people are going to hurt through this period, but the summary is rates are going up. Get used to it. You may be shocked with what happens running up to the end of 2022, but we have it on pretty good account now that 2023, towards the back end of 2023, it should start softening again as they get these supply chain concerns and constraints in line. You only need to pick up any paper, they're still talking about the cost of living increasing. I think like oils, like cooking oils, are up 15%, and fuel doesn't look like it's going to be coming down at any point soon. But it's just the way it is, mate.
So, Phil,
just the way it is.
Quick question, your advice. Someone called me this morning. They're coming off a fixed rate. They've been on a fixed rate of 2% for a few years. Fixed rate finishes in 4 weeks' time. Confused on whether to go on variable or whether to go on another fixed rate. Pretty disappointed because he said, man, I'm going from something that was really, really good to now something that's not good at all. What would you do? Would you fix or would you go variable for this person?
Mate, this is not advice, Tom. I'm just a journo. What would I do personally in that regards? Well, I know they're doing fixed rates now at like 7%. So,
yeah.
Personally, I wouldn't be fixing in 2-3 year interest rate at 7%. We've still got some way to go to get to that at a variable rate, and the indicators are that it will go up and will continue to go up, but it should come down once a lot of these inflationary pressures start to minimise. So,
why wouldn't the banks feel? Because if you think about it, every time you actually fix or don't fix, you're betting against the bank, aren't you? You're sort of saying, you're saying that, I'm saying this. Why would banks have fixed rates at such a high level if you believe that things are going to turn towards the latter part of next year?
Yeah, it's just like, if you bet against the house always wins, right? If you want to use a casino sort of philosophy towards it all. Look, for some people, and if you look historically, I think if you've stayed on variable rates, you're ahead of the game compared to those that fix their rates. And I think that's just historic numbers show that when you get in and out, it's going to depend left and right. If you want certainty on what you're going to be paying every single month on your mortgage, fix your mortgage. But I think there's a lot more downsides towards that. But I'm not appropriately qualified to give any particular views or advice around that. That's my personal sentiment for it. Mortgage brokers write 70% of all mortgages in Australia these days. Go and speak to your mortgage broker. They'll be able to tell you what is the most appropriate thing for you to do. And I'm happy to give a plug to a mortgage broker, finny.com.au. I've got an investment in it, Tom. I'll use them for my mortgages. They'll be happy to have a yarny if you're unsure about it. Sorry to put a plug in on this. It's supposed to be non-commercial.
No, that's all right. That's all right. You believe in it. You've got skin in the game. And quite frankly, right now, I think that there are quite a few people that need to make a decision on their loan or their loans. And at the moment, Phil, there is no sign of distress selling, no sign whatsoever. All I'm hearing on Saturdays doing my auctions, if I don't get the result, this is a stock standard answer I have from every vendor. It's like they've gone to their own script school. But we don't have to sell, Tom. We don't have to sell. I'm not having anyone that says, but Tom, we do have to sell. But that might change, Phil, if there's a lot of people that come off the fixed rates and then get hit with payments which are not something that they factored in.
Yeah, and mate, it's absolutely true. And they call this interest rate cliff. Yeah, the last mortgage I got on a property, it was half fixed, half variable. You know, the fixed component I fixed at 2.54%. The variable rate at that point in time was 2.89. Now that's up well over sort of 3, nearing 4% right now, and then will continue to go on. So, you know, as long as you've got your buffers in place and a strategy around it, you should be able to navigate your way through it. If you are if you feel like you're in trouble, or you think trouble is looming, get onto it quickly. If you've got time on your side, you can largely look for solutions around it. You may need to consolidate some debt. You may need to refinance. You may need to do all that sort of stuff. Again, a good mortgage broker can help you out with all that, the strategy around it and actually making it happen. Don't leave it too late. If you can see trouble ahead, get onto it now, because there are a whole bunch of different things you can do. You know, if you're on a P&I loan, for example, and you're concerned about rising rates for a period of time, you can just go to interest only. So it means you're not paying the principal component of your mortgage for a period of time. That may help you weather any sort of cash flow constraints that you have. All this stuff is available. It's pretty easy to put into place. And that's just one really, really simple strategy. It means you're not paying down the principal part of your loan, in particular if you're if you're an owner occupier, you probably don't want to be doing that. But there's ways and means to buttress any concerns you may have about your cash flow, navigating this upwards rate environment, which will be here for a period of time, but it will come down at some point in time, no doubt.
All right, Phil, I know that you're off to Adelaide today, later on, and you've got work there. It's, as usual, great to have you on. Next week, we're going to be talking 2 days after the Reserve Bank meeting. A lot of chatter coming in there in these last few minutes. I don't tell yourself why you have chosen not to take it property. That's a good one there. LinkedIn, how about temporary visa holders who get hit with an extra 7% stamp duty in Queensland, for example, of existing of their PPR? Yeah,
we can touch that. Let's get into that next week. What else we got there, Tom?
We've got David Stewart repeating what we always hear, but I don't need to sell, Tom. I don't need to sell. That's the stock standard thing there, Phil. And I've got to tell you, congratulations to the Australian government to actually be in a situation that we've been with everything that we have, and to have pretty much no one in a distressed position of having to sell at this point anyway, Phil. Means that there's reasonable good management by the government. Final thing before we go? Final score you're giving for 3 months into the job, Anthony Albanese. 3 months, his 3-month report card. Well,
the honeymoon period, they've been busy, but have they been productive? And I put that into the lens of Anthony Albanese, Penny Wong, the Foreign Minister, Richard Marles, the Defence Minister. They've been very active getting out of Australia and visiting friends and allies. A bit of a PR tour for themselves, introductory tour, but to also get their own view and lens towards Australia's role in the Asia Pacific in particular. Yesterday, I believe, was it yesterday or the day before, was the first, maybe it was yesterday, day before, the first day Parliament sat, the first day of Parliament for the Albanese government. The idea was that he wanted to sort of change the culture of question time in the chamber, and let's all be a bit nicer to each other. I think it lasted about 20 minutes before they were back to where they were once upon a time beforehand, at each other, giving each other a hard time. So if you're not into it, fair enough. But if you find that sort of stuff entertaining, engaging, I suggest you tune in to Question Time. At some point, you probably have some fun. So I think just back to old habits. Tom, score. It's really hard. You know, the Labor government, the Albanese government, has quite a lot of challenges ahead of it, because the big headlines, and we spoke about this prior to the election, Tom, potentially it was the poison chalice to win the most recent election, because you're moving into an environment of higher interest rates, higher inflation, very low unemployment, so challenges from business saying we need more people, how to combat immigration. COVID by no means has gone away. It's rife at the moment. There's a lot of concerns around that. So they've got a lot of headwinds. And the obvious point during this sort of introductory period is going, well, we've inherited this mess from the Morrison government. Okay, fair enough. I think it's going to take a good year and a half, too, before they get into their stride, and you can see what impacts they're making to the agenda in Australia, the policies they're putting in place, the policy settings they're putting in, and where they're going to concentrate it. You know, is this all about now trying to curb inflation? Is that the national imperative? We're all going to work together to curb inflation, and from that we can at least reset and get a new start, and then move on from there. I think they're saying that growth, GDP growth for this coming year is only going to be sort of 3%. Bit lackluster is what some people are saying. You know, is that going to be an opportunity for the government to sort of, you know, put the Australian economy on steroids? Well, there's all those headwinds we just spoke about. Are probably going to make it quite a struggle. So it's going to take them a couple of years, I think, to work out what's going on. Then they're going to have 2 years to try and be a bit more proactive rather than reactive, and whether that keeps them in government, who knows, mate.
All right, Phil, have a safe flight. We'll see you next week. To all our listeners, viewers here online, thank you again for your attention. Without you, it'd just be me and Phil.
See ya.